talking about the different party systems, okay, so there's 6 party systems, okay, beginning with John Adams in 1796 all the way through the 6-party system of today, which essentially comes about somewhere in the 1980s. Now, with the exception of the division between the 5th and 6th party systems, okay, all of the subsequent changes in the party system, so the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th party systems, all began with critical elections, okay? So, for example, the election of Andrew Jackson in 1828 symbolizes the end of the 1st, the beginning of the 2nd party system. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, the end of the 2nd party system, the beginning of the 3rd party system. The election of William McKinley in 1896, the end of the 3rd system, the beginning of the 4th system. And then the election of Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, the end of the 4th system, and then the beginning of the 5th system. Now, in each of these critical elections, all right, there are some things that are going on here that cause the change. One of them is that there is a shift in the electoral balance between the major parties. Now, in some cases, the shift in this electoral balance means that one party essentially gains or loses more relative to the other major party. Okay? So, for example, when we're talking about the 3rd party onto the 4th party, all right, that critical election, all right, with McKinley, what happens is you had in the 3rd party system the Republicans that were dominant in the North, you have the Democrats that were dominant in the South, but when it comes to the overall balance of power, it was relatively even. When McKinley comes to power, or the conditions in the United States, the political economic conditions in the United States that essentially fueled McKinley and the Republicans to victory in 1896, reflected a shift where a lot of the Democratic espoused policies, which were pro-farmer, pro-agrarian, those policies were essentially thrown out. All right? So the rejection of agrarian economic policies in favor of urban industrial policies, that is essentially what enabled the Republicans to get the upper hand during the 4th party system. Okay? And then, when you look at the transition from the 4th party system to the 5th party system, beginning with the critical election of Franklin Roosevelt, the idea was that these industrial policies and the embracing of big business and allowing capitalism and business to dictate the framework of the economic system in the United States, that paradigm essentially falls apart when we have the Great Depression. Because once the economy starts to tank in the late 20s, the expectation is big business will figure out what we need to do to essentially pull us out of this rut. In fact, it became worse, and big business was nowhere to be found, and suddenly the paradigm shifts to, we can't count on big business anymore. We can't count on the capitalists anymore to fix our economic system should it fail. We need the government to step in. Okay? And so that paradigm shift sets up what would essentially be the ascendancy of the Democrats with Franklin Roosevelt in 1932. And they pretty much hold serve, for the better part of the next 50 years until the 1980s when, without a critical election, the balance of power slowly evens out to where we are today, where we have Republicans and Democrats that are relatively even. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Okay? But in the 3rd to the 4th, the 4th to the 5th, okay, you have situations where it's the Republicans and the Democrats. It's just that there is a shift in who's the more powerful of the two parties. Yes?
What do you mean by critical? Like it wasn't a landslide?
It was a landslide.
Oh, it was a landslide.
Okay, it was a landslide, and it led to one party getting the upper hand on the other party. Okay? So from 3rd to 4th, you're talking about from basically even Steven to the Republicans, taking control. Then, from 4th to 5th, it goes from the Republicans taking control to the Democrats taking control. Okay? Now, another way in which there is a critical election, which again reflects a shift, is that sometimes certain parties essentially, fall apart. They're eliminated. Okay? So, for example, when we're talking about the transition from the 1st to the 2nd party system, we see the end of the Federalist Party. Because the Federalist Party basically hitched its wagons on supporting, or I should say advocating for, a pro-British position, all right, which became disastrous during the War of 1812. Okay? So post-American Revolution, there were some who felt, particularly the Federalists, that, we should revisit, warming